The metallic clink of tools striking hovering engine components in the air, the smell of motor oil. I used an old rag to wipe my greasy hands. Once more, it was a late-night workshop. I didn't mind, though. Fixing the broken and getting things to function again has a certain sense of fulfillment. If only interpersonal connections were as easy as engines. Ivan Petrov is the owner of Zvonariva, a tiny workshop in a sleepy village. However, it belongs to me. I gave it everything I had. Over the years, I created it with my own hands and an unwavering trust in hard work. One may say humble. However, I see it as evidence of what a guy is capable of. Sincere work. I felt the phone vibrate in my pocket as I took the workshop. My wife is Natalia. We have been together for 10 years. But lately, it felt more like we were housemates than life partners, just strangers living together. I let out a sigh as I readied myself for my return home. There was silence in the house. Just Natalia's fingers pressing lightly on the phone. Her face brightened up as I walked in, scarcely looking up. The screen's frigid light. "Are you running late?" With indifference, she tossed it. I had to complete Elena Vasilyeva's box transfer. I replied while draping my jacket. "You are aware of the situation." Natalia gave me a look. In her eyes, bitterness. "I realize that my knowledge of your life seems to be dwindling." "Jaeger." I refrained from making an argument. "Were you?" "I'm exhausted. I went to the kitchen to prepare dinner because my head was beginning to hurt. Tomorrow night, I'm attending a party." It originated in the living room. It's neither a request nor an inquiry. A comment was made with the same apathy that had become second nature. I put my hand on the refrigerator door and paused. "I have tomorrow off. We could hang out." There was Natalia in the doorway, crossed arms on his chest. "Svetlana's." I had already promised to attend the birthday celebration at work. "Are you able to reschedule?" It had been a full week since we last spent time together. Her chuckle lacked humor and was unpleasant. Rearranging. "Hey, birthday. Ivan, don't make me laugh. I'm a free woman, nonetheless. I am free to do as I like." I felt like I was slapped in the face by these words. A liberated woman, similar to our union. Our pledges are meaningless. I looked away. I couldn't look at her. "All okay. Attend your party." In the quiet of the kitchen, I heard her frustrated sigh and her fading footsteps, but I couldn't get rid of the impression that something had changed significantly between us. My wife, Natalia, would never have said such a thing to me. She would never have so casually rejected my feelings. Perhaps, however, I was completely unaware of this Natalia. The following evening, I observed through the window as Natalia got into her car, wearing an attire too exposing for an everyday work party, as though she was going out on a special occasion. She drove off without turning around, leaving me to think and feel increasingly anxious. I tried using myself as a diversion. TV, a book, even the workshop, but Natalia's thoughts kept returning. A shift in her conduct. The long workdays, the incessant texts on her phone, and our increasing separation. Unwilling to accept any other explanation, I dismissed it all as stress. However, I was unable to dismiss the bothersome doubts when the clock struck midnight and Natalia was still gone. I heard heels clattering unevenly on the parquet floor as the front door opened at midnight. I got up from the sofa, getting ready for what was ahead. Natalia entered the living area. Her makeup was smudged, and her hair shot up. She had a strange smell and the smell of alcohol. However, it was the thing that stopped me. Her neck had bite marks that were blazing red. "Did you enjoy yourself?" I questioned her. Her voice was unexpectedly calm. She blinked a little as she woke up and, to my surprise, laughed. "You ought to have been there, Ivan." It was freeing. I moved in closer. I couldn't take my eyes off the indisputable evidence of her adultery. "I understand. Could you please elaborate?" Natalia put her hand over her neck. Her face briefly showed signs of panic. Then stubbornness took its place. "I am an Ivan-free woman, I promise. What I want is what I want." Something hardened within me at that very moment. The last glimmer of a naive explanation vanished. Silently, I observed Natalia sinking into the sofa and falling asleep almost instantly. She hardly put her head on the pillow. That night, I sat on the chair and observed Larissa's breathing without falling asleep. By daylight, my mind was racing, and I decided on something. I was already in the kitchen, drinking coffee and groaning in agony when Natalia got up. Well, I hoped she had a terrible headache and experienced at least a little of the suffering she inflicted on me. With a raspy voice, Ivan yelled, "Bring me some water." I entered the living room, but there was no water there. Natalia was singing as she brought a stack of papers. Her expression was one of confusion. What are these? Divorce documents, I. Despite the emotions pouring inside of me, I spoke in a calm tone. Don't you think it's time to quit acting? Natalia's shocked eyes grew wide. The drunkenness subsided. Ivan, get a divorce. What are you discussing? That last night you returned home, and you were covered in the tracks of another man. The distance between us giving up 10 years of marriage for a single night of freedom, the falsehoods, the late hours, etc. The abrupt movement caused her to wrinkle her nose and sit up. Please, Ivan. It's merely an error. We can fix it, but my head was already trembling. We can't, Natalia. Last night, you made your decision. It's my turn to make mine now. In front of her, I placed the papers on the coffee table. The last ink on this page is my choice. I'm spending a few days at a friend's house. During that time, I advise you to find another place to live. I turned to go. I halted when I heard Natalia's voice. Ivan, you can't do that. You are unaware of what you are losing. I turned to face her again and studied her. Desperation in her eyes, hair tangled, makeup smudged. I realized then that the woman I loved and was married to was no longer with me. A stranger I don't recognize or wish to know has taken her place. No, answered Natalia in a stern yet hushed voice. In terms of my self-respect, I am aware of what I am losing and what I am gaining. After saying those words, I left the memories and the wreckage of our marriage behind. God damn it, that stung like hell. However, as I entered the automobile, I sensed something more than just pain. Determination. Natalia made up her mind. It's my turn to make mine now. And I made the decision to be resilient and strong. To be the type of man who, rather than being broken by treachery, will use it as motivation to become a stronger, better version of myself. It will be a challenging journey. Ivan Petrov, I'm not going to lie. And I've previously created something from nothing. I'm capable of doing it once more. I walked out of the abandoned house. I promised myself that I would not only live through this betrayal, but also flourish despite it, and that I would make Natalia rue the day she had the audacity to let me go so lightly. The days that followed were filled with pain and rage, interspersed with my moments of unwavering resolve. I poured myself into my task, finding comfort in the straightforwardness of physical labor and the simplicity of engines. Unlike people, cars are honest and trustworthy. You can diagnose, fix, and move on if something is broken. I wish relationships were that simple. I received a phone call one Tuesday afternoon. When the phone rang, I was covered in oil. An unknown number appeared on the screen, but I was instructed to respond to Mr. Zvonareva. It was a firm, businesslike voice. This is Olga Fedorova from Belogo and Partners, a law company. I'm phoning on Larissa Zvonareva's behalf, your wife. My free hand curled into a fist, and I could feel my jaw tighten. I should have known that Natalia wouldn't give up easily, of course. I'm an ex-wife. The voice was rough. Mrs. Belogo, can you give me anything? There was a pause. Mrs. Zvonareva hired me to manage the divorce process, Mr. Zvonareva. She asserts that your workshop and all other jointly obtained property are hers. I had trouble breathing for a while. My passion and my life revolve around the workshop, something I created from the ground up using my own hands and an unwavering belief in hard work. Natalia also wants half. Are you still on the line, Mr. Zvonareva? You can inform Larissa that she will only receive a workshop over my corpse after I take a long breath and force my voice to stay composed during the connection. Before Belogo could respond, I hung up. My thoughts are racing. This is a fight now, not just a divorce. Additionally, two can play filthy if Natalia so desires. I drove to an ordinary building on the outskirts of town the same day after closing the workshop early. Alexei Romanov, attorney at law, was written on the door. I had known Alexei since high school, and we had been friends for a long time. He went on to become a lawyer, while I became an expert in the field of cars. However, we stayed in contact. When I walked in, Alexei looked up, his eyebrows arched at my surprise visit. Why have you come here, Ivan? Feeling the weight of the past few days, I sunk into the chair across from his desk. Alexei, I need your assistance. Larissa is making an effort to take everything away. When I explained the problem to Alexei, his countenance took on a serious expression. He had already retrieved a notebook by the time I was done. He was scribbling on the paper. He said, "All right, Ivan, this is what we're going to do." He spoke in that focused, piercing tone I recalled from debates in school. We must first collect evidence. You have half of your property under Natalia's claim. We must demonstrate that she is undeserving. I gave a nod. There was already a developed plan. In my mind, she is involved in an affair. If I can prove it, I'm sure. Alexei's eyes shone brightly. It will undoubtedly strengthen our position. But suspicion alone is insufficient. Ivan, we require indisputable proof. I felt stronger as I left Alexei's office. Natalia believed she could take what was rightfully mine and dominate me. She would soon realize her mistake. The ensuing weeks were packed with activities. I operated the workshop throughout the day, maintaining a positive demeanor around clients and staff, but at night I changed into a detective, an investigator, and a guy on a mission. I searched through past credit card accounts, phone logs, and anything else that would provide me with a hint about Natalia's activities. A picture gradually started to take shape, piece by piece. Victor Sokolov, doctor, was her lover. Natalia was a nurse at the same city hospital. I discovered hundreds of their texts, filled with passionate expressions of love and candid information that made me shudder. I discovered hotel invoices and pricey presents that I knew I hadn't purchased for her. The video, however, provided the conclusive evidence. A surveillance camera outside the Yut Hotel captured clear, grainy video of Natalia and Dmitry in the Strasnoy Abiati. Natalia claimed to have done a double shift at the hospital on the night that the on-time video was shot. Something inside of me hardened even more as I stared at the frozen images on the computer screen. This was the deliberate ruination of our entire lives, not simply dishonesty. My head was whirling from the tangled web of lies. I wasn't finished yet, though. I still felt that there was something wrong with the situation. Alexei, Victor, did he have more to tell? I was certain. I called Tatiana Belova, a friend of mine who works as a private investigator. I said, I need all the information you can find about this guy, referring to Victor. Diner Tatiana arched an eyebrow at the table during our covert meeting at the nightlight. She let out a little laugh. Is this all business or personal? I looked her in the eye. She gave a nod. Knowledge glowed in her gaze. Let me see what I can locate in a week, Ivan. As promised, the hefty folder was given to my workshop by Tatiana. 7 days later, exactly. I felt a chilly delight as I looked through its contents. A knight in gleaming armor was not what Dmitry Sokolov was. He was a cunning con artist who had a track record of luring vulnerable ladies and embezzling their money. He was now aiming for Natalia. I nearly felt terrible for her, but then I recalled how icy her eyes were when she asserted her freedom. The apathy with which she disregarded our years together. No, Natalia had made her own home. Let him lie there now. With the new knowledge in hand, I turned back to Alexei. As he perused the folder, his eyes grew wild. He let out a faint whistle. Ivan, this is gold. Looking at me, he said, with fresh reverence. By doing this, we can hold Natalia accountable for any damages in addition to protecting your property. She is working with this Dmitry to defraud you, not simply cheating on you. I gave a nod. A grin appeared on my face. Fantastic. I want her to understand how much anguish I've been through. Alexei let out a sigh. I must ask, Ivan, are you certain you want to go with this? Saying no is still an option. Let the attorneys handle everything. I wondered for a moment. Isn't it simpler to simply wash my hands of everything? Allow Victor and Natalia to go on and begin a new life. However, I recalled the expression in Natalia's eyes the night she had returned home, missing the fragrance of another man and booze. No, the icy brutality in her voice when she proclaimed herself free. The visitors to our small village were bitten by the frost of autumn. Every day I strolled to the studio with the depressing leaves beneath my feet. However, the ice crust was far colder than the outside cold. My heart said, every day brought fresh insights. They all contributed fuel to my fire of resolve. Apparently, Natalia was rather busy. Dmitry was the only person to annoy. She was enmeshed in a web of falsehoods that threatened to overwhelm me. Sitting in my office in the workshop, I went over Tatiana's most recent report. With her help, the private investigator had surpassed the police. Oh, Dmitry, the sort that made me shiver. Ivan noticed. Alexei nodded at the phone, her voice trembling. Has a lengthy history with this individual. Fraud turned into embezzlement, and even a domestic abuse accusation was dropped. I reclined in my seat. My lips formed a smile. Yes, I could see that. Natalia had also become connected with that jerk. Alexei let out a deep, anxious sigh. I must ask again, Ivan, are you certain you want to do this? Is it not too late to simply refuse? Let the attorneys win over everyone. I considered it briefly before recalling Larissa's expression that evening. No, Alexei, I responded resolutely and firmly. I will see this through. They wish to act shady. I'll explain dirt to them. Alexei was nodding in agreement, and I could practically hear it. Okay, Jaeger, I agree with you if that's how you want it. However, we must behave wisely. We might lose everything with just one mistake. I know, I said. Already, my mind was racing. Opportunities arise. That's why I need your assistance. Alexei, when the moment is right, we'll slam the trap that we've set. I spent the next 3 weeks working on my strategy with the same painstaking attention to detail that I used when I was fixing engines. Every action was planned, and every step was analyzed. I began by getting in touch with former friends in the community. What individuals are willing to say when you ask them is incredible. I've known them for years, and you've gradually retained their secrets while fixing their cars. I assembled a more comprehensive account of Dmitri's life in our community. My blood boiled at what I found. In addition to being a liar and cheater, Victor was also a very poor gambler. He owed money to risky individuals he didn't want to deal with. Tatiana was the one who gave me the final puzzle piece. One evening, she arrived at the workshop after closing. Ivan, you're not going to enjoy this. Sliding a folder over my desk, she murmured. I took it open. What I saw caused my eyes to enlarge. Larissa's name appears on credit card bills and bank statements. All I knew, however, was the transaction. We never purchased pricey timepieces or intricate technology. Not even a sports car down payment. Tatiana clarified that she was surreptitiously moving funds from your joint account. Her voice became empathetic. She and Dmitri appeared to be getting along well. Using your funds. I should have been upset and felt deceived once more. Instead, though, I felt a chilly calmness. It was exactly what I required. I'm grateful, Tatiana. I spoke in a relaxed tone. I just got the secret to destroying them from you. She arched an eyebrow. She saw a glimmer of worry in her eyes. What are you doing, Ivan? I looked her in the eye and let a small smile slip onto my lips. Nothing against the law. I'll just make sure they benefit from their actions if that's what you were concerned about. I picked up the phone and called Alexei after Tatiana departed. It's time, Alexei. We must act quickly. The days that followed were packed with activities. Alexei and I put in endless hours gathering information and drafting legal paperwork. Everything was prepared for when we slammed our trap. Through Tatiana, I've been keeping up with Natalia and Victor's reports. They were becoming reckless and braver by the day. In the hopes of giving her an advantage in the divorce process, Victor was urging Natalia to make up allegations of psychological abuse. They were playing directly into my hands without realizing it. I implemented the last part of my strategy one Saturday morning. I watched as an ordinary van drew up in front of my workshop. The man who emerged from it was not particularly noteworthy. He held out his hand and replied, "What I needed, Mr. Zvonareva. From Defense Tech, I'm Sergey. You contacted us to have new security cameras installed." I firmly shook his hand and nodded. Okay, let's get started. I was unable to control my increasing sensation of eagerness while Sergey and his staff worked. These weren't only security cameras. They were positioned to record every word and action, acting as my retaliation's eyes and ears. The sun had already fallen when they finished, and the parking area was covered with lengthy shadows. The feeds from the new cameras sprang to life on my computer screen as I stood in my office. I just needed to do it now. It wasn't long to wait. When I was shutting the workshop the following evening, I noticed Victor and Larissa typing everything in the alley behind the workshop. I watched in rage as they argued in whispers, believing they couldn't be seen on the camera or screen. Victor was pacing back and forth in agitation. Natalia made an effort to soothe him. "Natalia, we need the money," he muttered. Desperation twisted his face. "The people I owe won't have to wait long," Natalia pleaded in her voice. "Dmitri, I'm trying, but Jaeger's attorney is obstructing everything we do. We must be patient." Dmitri gave a bitter laugh. "Without patience, without humor. Natalia, you don't know these folks. They don't. Be patient if we don't discover the money right away." Halfway through, he stopped speaking, but I could see Natalia's eyes were filled with anxiety. Good. Let him experience dread and understand the repercussions of his behavior. I reclined in my seat. A chilly grin appeared on my lips. This exceeded my expectations in every way. I have evidence of their financial manipulations in addition to proof of their affair. They were desperate. I grabbed my mobile phone and called Michael. Alexei kept his gaze fixed on the television. Jaeger is here. This is something you must see. I believe it's time for us to take action. I hung up the phone, feeling content. Dmitry and Natalia believed they were so intelligent and untouchable. What lay ahead was unknown to them. It had laid a trap that would annihilate them both when it slammed down. The courtroom, a monument to justice that I hoped would finally win out, stood in front of me. I made the motion more for personal comfort than for show. Natalia will discover today that her behavior has repercussions. Alexei climbed up the stairs with me. All set. Ivan. I clenched my mouth and nodded. More than prepared. It was time for Victor and Larissa to take responsibility for everything. The judicial room was a battleground, and the first to attack was Natalia's attorney. He was presented as a snide, workaholic husband who had pushed his destitute, lonely wife to date someone else. As he constructed a web of deceit, I sat unconcerned. He said, "Mr. Zvonareva." There was a phony pity in his voice. "You frequently stay late at work, leaving your wife alone. Isn't that true?" I pressed myself against the microphone. I did stay late at work, yes. I was starting a company to support our family. Additionally, you weren't ignoring your wife's emotional needs by doing this. A sudden outburst of rage was swiftly quelled. I adore my spouse. I took care of her. She never informed me of any obstacles or code requirements. Larissa's attorney grinned, assuming I was being weak. Alexei's time came next, though. "Your Honor," said Alexei. His tone was composed and assured. "I want to provide proof that Ms. Zvonareva's adultery started much earlier than any purported negligence on the part of my client." As Alexei showed the results of our investigation, phone logs, hotel receipts, even surveillance images of Natalia and Victor, the courtroom fell silent. Natalia's face went pale as she saw all of the evidence. Her self-assured smile turned to panic. However, Alexei's presentation of the financial documents was the high point. "Your Honor, according to these records, Mrs. Zvonareva and her lover, Mr. Sokolov, took money out of the joint account she kept with my client on a regular basis. They paid for their affair-related expenses and luxuries with these monies." As he perused the papers, the judge's brows lifted. I looked across at Natalia. Her fists were clenched as she gazed at the table. It appeared as though Victor, who was seated behind her, wanted to collapse. I noticed a shift in the atmosphere as I left the courtroom. Natalia was aware that the balance of justice had shifted in my favor. In a desperate attempt to save her from this catastrophe, her lawyer was whispering to her. But this was only the beginning, and I wasn't finished yet. I saw Natalia's and Victor's relationship deteriorate under the strain in the weeks that followed. Once so arrogant and self-assured, Victor now appeared troubled. He winced each time his phone rang. I understood why his creditors were responding favorably to the anonymous messages I had sent them. I noticed Natalia coming one evening as I was wrapping up the workshop. She looked different, wearing jeans and a basic top instead of fashionable clothing. I caught a glimpse of the woman I had been married to, but her face was devoid of cosmetics. My heart hardened once more, though, when I recalled the bite marks on her neck and the hurtful things she had spoken to me. "Ivan," she murmured, her voice shaking. We could converse as she crossed her arms and banged on the door jamb. "Natalia, what are you talking about?" "About how you attempted to deprive me of everything. How you cheated, stole, and lied." When I said it, she winced. "Oh, Jaeger, I was wrong. Now I understand. He's not who I assumed he was, Dmitry. We can attempt to make amends." I chuckled. The piercing noise reverberated around the deserted parking lot. "Put things right? Do you mean me?" "Natalia, you made your decision. You claimed to be an independent woman. Do you recall? You see now how valuable that independence is." Her eyes filled with tears. "I will stop at nothing to be loyal, honest, and faithful. So please accept my apologies, Ivan." "No, it's over, Larissa. Now is the time to follow your selected course." When she pivoted, she drooped. I yelled at her. "Yes, Natalia. My regards are with Dmitry. His creditors will be pleased to learn his current whereabouts, I'm sure." As she rushed off, her horrified expression was almost hilarious. Nearly. I smiled as I made my way back to the workshop. Faced Natalia and Victor would soon discover the real cost of crossing Ivan after the trap had slammed shut. Calling Reverend the weeks that followed were jam-packed with events. I immersed myself in my task, taking comfort in the engine, the simplicity, and the honest work. However, even as I concentrated on my work, I continued to watch Natalia and Victor's demise. Each of Tatiana's frequent reports was better than the last. Dmitri's creditors were growing impatient with his gaming obligations. Natalia was unable to assist him because her assets were frozen as a result of the divorce procedures. The long-awaited crash occurred one chilly September evening. When I heard the bell over the door, I was by myself in the workshop, completing some paperwork. "It's closed," I yelled without raising my head. "It won't be long." I recognized Viktor Zvonarev's voice simultaneously. I slowly lifted my head to look him in the eye. I could see the terror in his eyes as he stood there trying to look cool in his jeans and leather jacket. Dmitri spoke in a steady, even tone. "Not that I give change. Beggar." His fists were clenched as he stepped forward. "Now you can back off. I am aware of your actions. Text messages that are anonymous." Natalia's pressure keeps stopping, so I sat back in my chair and thought about him calmly. "Or what? What specifically are you considering doing to me, Dmitri?" He was momentarily perplexed. Then his evil grin twisted his cheeks. "Zvonarev's buddies, whom I know, have the ability to ruin your life." I laughed because I couldn't help myself. Victor seemed taken aback by these sounds. He took a step back. I rose gently again. "Friends. Do you mean the people who are now trying to find you in order to recoup their money?" Victor's blood rushed forth. "Face how? How did you find out?" I strolled around the table, taking pleasure in Dmitri's tenseness as I got closer. "Dmitri, I know everything. I am aware of the game and the money that you and Natalia took from me. I am aware of the women you have previously cheated on. I am fully informed." Dmitri lost his tough guy demeanor. He scanned the area as though looking for a way out. "We can work something out, Ivan. You won't see me again after I leave town." Slowly, I shook my head. "You don't set the rules here, Dmitri. You made a decision. Accept the consequences now." As the person in charge, there was a sound outside. Dmitri recognized the voices, and his eyes widened in fear. He had been discovered by his creditors. "Please," he begged. He could hardly be heard speaking. "Keep me away from them." I turned to face this man who had conspired to ruin my finances and had contributed to the breakdown of my marriage. I briefly considered extending mercy. Then I recalled Natalia's, statement. "Liberated woman." "That's correct, Dmitri." I spoke in a chilly tone. "I won't offer them to you since, as a man, you will confront them when you leave this room." Victor's betrayed expression was nearly hilarious. He opened his mouth to protest, but his lips froze. As soon as the workshop door opened and two burly men stepped inside, Victor was the center of their attention. One of them growled at "You, little rat," behind you. I took a step back and watched helplessly as they took Dmitri's arms. Weakly, he resisted. His eyes pleaded with me for assistance, but I remained still and silent. I yelled, "Gentlemen, try not to beat him up too badly." As they were removing him, just now, I was cleaning the parking lot. I was left in the quiet of the workshop when the door banged. I heard fists and muffled cries, but I remained where I was. Dmitri took a seat. "Let him lie there now." I found out that Victor had been admitted to the hospital the following day. Fractured jaw, fractured ribs, and various wounds. It will be a long time before he seduces ladies again. In the afternoon, Natalia showed up in the workshop. She had swollen, red eyes. "Were you aware?" she inquired. "Were you aware that Victor was the target of these individuals?" Calmly, I looked into her eyes. I was well informed. "Natalia, if your desire for independence hadn't blinded you so much, you should have known too." When I said it, she winced. "Please, Ivan, I need assistance. Victor is in the hospital, and I'm going to get divorced and lose everything. I'm at a loss on what to do." I briefly experienced a flashback of my past affection for her. Then I recalled my heart, the robbery, the lies, and the betrayal. Once more fossilized. "Natalia, you made your decision." My voice was lifeless as I spoke. "Live with it now." When she turned away, she drooped her shoulders in surrender. Her misfortune did not make me happy. Only the knowledge that justice had been done. The trap was successful. Dmitri and Natalia were entangled in its web. The blow final was the only thing left to do. The final divorce hearing day arrived with clarity. With steady hands, I adjusted my tie as I stood in front of the mirror. The devastated, betrayed spouse was a far cry from the man staring back at me. Only a few months ago, his jaw was gripped with resolve and his eyes were clear. This man refused to be anyone's victim because he realized his value. Outside the courthouse, Alexei met me. There was so much gathered evidence in his briefcase. "Ivan, get ready." I gave a nod. My lips formed a smile. More than prepared. "Alexei, let's get this done." The courtroom was full. Our small community was ablaze with rumors of our sensational divorce. And it seems that everyone was eager to watch this drama's conclusion. The defendants was where Natalia's Saturday workstation. She appeared frail and little. Her lawyer, who used to be so self-assured and combative, suddenly appeared to be a man who had lost the fight. I experienced an odd sense of tranquility when the judge arrived and the hearing started. This was the point at which all of our hard work, suffering, and treachery had finally paid off. Our situation was presented by Alexei with surgical accuracy. He presented the proof of Natalia's adultery, financial deception, and attempts to sway the court by making up violent allegations. Natalia curled up more and more with every new exposure. Her expression was one of regret and embarrassment. There was silence in the courtroom when the judge was ready to render a decision. I didn't breathe. My life was on the line for years. The judge started to consider the evidence. He spoke in a firm tone. "Ivan Zvonarev, the plaintiff, wins this case. Mrs. Zvonareva will not be entitled to any of Mr. Zvonarev's assets, and her claims are rejected. Additionally, Ms. Zvonareva will have to pay back the money that she stole from her joint account." The hall echoed with a collective sigh. I sat there gasping for air. When the judge went on, "Both the family house and Mr. Zvonareva's workshop are still fully owned by him. The cost of her legal representation and any other debts accrued during the marriage will be borne by Mrs. Zvonareva." When the judge finally made his decision, he struck the gavel. A burden was lifted from my shoulders. It was done. I prevailed. After leaving the courthouse, Natalia bolted. Her face turned white. She looked to me for the final time as I followed her into the corridor. "Jaeger," she said softly. She was stuttering. "I'm sorry about everything. Is there a possibility that we may start over?" I gave her my full attention. The lady I loved, with whom I had created a life, was no longer with me. A stranger I no longer knew or wanted to know in my life took her place. I answered firmly, but not brutally. "No, Natalia. I had lost the woman I loved. Because of your treachery and falsehoods, you killed her. It's the end." As she nodded and firmly accepted what I had said, tears were streaming down her face. I gave her a final call as she turned to go. "Do you recall that you were a free woman, Natalia? You're totally free of me now, then. From everything we've created together, from our lives together. Hopefully, it was worthwhile." I saw her leave, sobbing silently, her shoulders trembling. I recalled the vicious remarks she had hurled at me, as well as the bite scars on her neck. I knew I had done the right thing when she attempted to take away all I had fought so hard to earn. I felt like a different person as I left the courthouse. I was once in danger of being destroyed by that betrayal. Rather, it had made me stronger and more resilient, ensuring that I would never again be a victim. I took the car to my workshop, which had turned into a haven for me during this whole ordeal. I experienced a wave of pride and contentment as I stood in front of it. No one could take this away from me. It was my legacy and my work. My phone vibrated with a message from Alexei at that very time. It said that everything was ready. Natalia was no longer employed at the hospital. She would no longer be employed in this town as a nurse. I grinned. Although it was a necessary step, it was possibly harsh. I had to make sure that Victor and Natalia would never again meddle in my affairs or my life. I noticed a car driving underneath as the sun started to set, creating lengthy shadows across the parking lot. Natalia was the one. Tears were streaming down her face. She appeared to be broken. After exiting, she glanced about unsurely before focusing on me for a considerable amount of time. We simply stood across the pavement, staring at one another. We had so much history together, so much affection that had devolved into hurt and resentment. Natalia finally said something. "I guess this is farewell." I gave a nod. I had an impenetrable face. "Well, I guess it does." She paused, as if she had something else to say. However, she later had second thoughts. She took one final dejected glance, got into her car, and drove off. I watched as the last traces of our life together were taken with them as her taillights vanished around the corner. I experienced a sense of calm as I turned to face my workshop. I had to recreate my life now. A company to manage and a future to build. I would also do it according to my own conditions. I am the only one to obey. Going home after picking up the workshop, I couldn't help but grin. For the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the voyage, even though the road ahead remained uncertain. Even after everything had subsided, I could still hear the reverberations of the divorce. In front of my car business, I stood. With the keys in hand, a new day is about to begin. However, today appeared to be different. I felt lighter for the first time in months. I felt a peculiar mix of relief and loneliness once the weight of a poisonous marriage was removed. I was struck by how much had changed as I opened the door to the workshop. The man who had been standing here a few months before, oblivious to his wife's adultery, was not the same man who entered the workshop today. Someone rougher, colder, but stronger, took the place of that man. I made it through Natalia's treacherous divorce proceedings and her Victor infidelity. I won, not just survived. I owned the house and the workshop. Most importantly, I still had my dignity. I felt a sense of calmness wash over me as I turned on the eye. My new life would now be built on this location, which served as my haven during the storm. One of my oldest clients, Margarita Sergeyevna, was there when the bell above the door rang. "Ivan, good morning." Her smile was unsure as she spoke. "How are you?" I understood her true question. In a tiny community, news spreads quickly. And for weeks, people in the town spoke about my divorce. Margarita Sergeyevna responded, "I'm doing fine," and was shocked to learn that it was accurate. "How may I help you today?" "Work on the vehicle owned by Margarita Sergeyevna?" I sensed that she was watching me. She was searching for the broken man she most likely anticipated seeing. However, that individual had vanished. As the year progressed, and every issue was identified and resolved, I felt more resilient and self-assured. Margarita Sergeyevna's automobile was acting like a kitten by the time she left. And suddenly the whole town was aware. Ivan Petrov was back on the scene and performing quite well. I pushed myself into my work with newfound vigor throughout the next 2 weeks. My concentrated mind was able to effortlessly uncover the mysteries of machines that had before seemed intractable, like a puzzle. I was suddenly sought after by clients who had dreaded me during the divorce process, awed by my perseverance and commitment. I was ending the session one evening when I noticed a familiar face coming. My friend and lawyer, Alexei, had been there for me at the worst of my troubles. He yelled out, "Ivan." He was holding a V6 beer packet. "You might want to celebrate," I thought. I arched an eyebrow. "What am I celebrating?" Alexei grinned. "Your liberty, my companion, and that you're still standing when most men would have passed out." As the sun descended over the city, we sipped beers while sitting on the hood of an old car that I was fixing. We sat in silent companionship for a while. Together, the two men had survived the conflict. Alexei finally said something. "I have witnessed a lot of divorces in my time, including some pretty shady ones, Ivan. However, I've never witnessed anyone experience it as you did. After that, most men are broken. How about you? You've grown more powerful." As I thought about what he had said, I took a sip of my long drink. Finally, I said I had to. Dmitry and Natalia believed they could destroy me and erase all I had achieved. I couldn't allow that to occur. Alexei gave a nod. Knowledge glowed. "You didn't allow it to happen," in his eyes. "They are outplayed by you. But was it worth it, Jaeger? Tell me." "Retaliation." I'm referring to Natalia's face when I won the case in court. "What about Victor's panic?" I recalled the sense of joy I got from exacting revenge when his creditors caught up with him. However, I also recalled the price. The restless nights, the unrelenting rage, the effort put into strategizing and plotting. I found it satisfying. Admittedly, though, the true triumph was not in eliminating them, but rather in taking back my life and refusing to let their treachery define me. Alexei gave me a clink with his bottle. "Now that was truly worth celebrating," he remarked. As the months went by, our small town's rhythm changed. I had more business than ever in my shop. To deal with the influx of orders, I brought on 2 more mechanics. Adversity seems to have strengthened me rather than broken me down. I was tinkering with an old machine I had purchased for him as a project one lazy Sunday afternoon when I heard a strange motor thunder into my driveway. Alexei was exiting his automobile as I scuttled out from beneath it. With a severe look on his face, Ivan spoke in a solemn tone. "We must speak." I welcomed him in after wiping my hands on a cloth. Alexei rarely came to see me on the weekends, and I could tell by the expression on his face that this visit would not be cordial. Alexei inhaled deeply as we sat down in my living room. I have Larissa's news. The mention of her name caused my jaw to clench uncontrollably. How about her? Alexei opened his briefcase and took out a folder. She was discovered by one of my local contacts. She treats her poorly. Jaeger. He extended his picture to me. It took me a moment to realize that the woman in the photo was Natalia, my ex-wife. She had once been so put together and well-groomed, but now she appeared worn out and gaunt. She was leaving a run-down residential complex. Her hair was flying up, and her clothing was disheveled. She has part-time jobs, Alexei added. For the most part, just getting by, based on what I had heard. I gazed at the picture. My emotions were raging. A part of me was pleased. That was the cost of her treachery. However, the other part of me, the I had assumed was dead, felt something like sympathy, but more like the knowledge of how far she had fallen. How about Victor? Alexei gave him a shake. He hasn't been spotted. Rumor has it that he left the nation in order to avoid paying his obligations. Others. The implication was clear, and he went silent. In order to process this knowledge, I nodded. That heartless physician who contributed to the breakdown of my marriage, Dmitri, was no longer there. Is he presently at the bottom of a river or on a beach? Why are you telling me this, Alexei? I don't care. I asked, giving the picture back. He leaned forward. Alexei, I knew you, Ivan, because his eyes were serious. Despite all of that, you are a decent person. I wanted to tell you about it, not through rumors. Although I was grateful for Alexei's candor, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Well done, guy. Alexei stated firmly. You what you had do after everything I did to do them. They were now dealing with the repercussions of their decisions, just as you are. They had to make some decisions. I gave a nod. I was appreciative of his comprehension. For a while, we sat in silence. Between us hung the gravity of Larissa's collapse. At last, Alexei stood up to go. He turned to face me at the door. Jaeger simply refuses to let it get to you. Well done. You've created something worthwhile. Refrain from letting the notion of them bring you down. After a little while, the bell above the workshop door forced me to come out from under the hood and use a rag to wipe my hands. I turned to say hello to the client. Right there, I'll be. I yelled, keeping my gaze fixed on the engine. Go slowly. The voice was a pleasant female voice. I'm taking in the scenery. A woman I didn't recognize was leaning against the north braid when I looked up, startling me. She had short, dark hair and eyes that were already furrowed at the corners, making her beautiful. Irina is my name. She held out her hand as she spoke. You're the best mechanic in town, according to my brother Nikolai. Observing the firm handshake, I shook hers. Petrov, Ivan. Nikolai is correct. I'm the greatest. I spoke without conceit. Just a factual statement. A deep, genuine chuckle appeared to reverberate throughout the workshop as Irina laughed. To what extent do you believe in yourself? That's nice. In males. I was momentarily perplexed. It surprised me that this lovely woman would even consider flirting with me. How did your automobile turn out? I read and down my throat. I murmured. I calmed down as Sophia explained the weird sound her engine was producing. The automobiles and engines were familiar. Issues that need to be resolved. However, I couldn't help but notice her observing me while I worked on her car. After I finished, we had light discussions. As a token of appreciation, Sophia insisted on taking me to lunch. I agreed to a maternity ward at a neighborhood eatery against my better judgment. Sophia had just moved to town, I found out. A writer who came here to enjoy the tranquility. She was intelligent, humorous, and invigorating. Simple. After we finished our lunch, she said, Ivan, are you planning to ask me out? I might have to do it all while nearly choking on coffee. I don't think that's a smart idea. Irina's eyes softened as she muttered. She whispered, I heard Nikolai tell me about your ex-wife. Jaeger, I won't take her place. I simply felt that having supper with someone who values an engine-savvy man would be pleasant. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something other than resentment or wrath when I glanced at her. It was optimism. Dinner sounds delicious. Heard my voice. The way Sophia smiled was like the light piercing the clouds. My life took unexpected turns during the course of the following several months. I began dating Sophia gradually. Despite their own baggage, both were open to exploring the possibilities. My company kept doing well. I started to consider growing my workshop and brought on more staff. Once whispering behind my back, the community now referred to me as successful and resilient. Sophia turned to face me gravely one evening as we sat on my porch, taking in the sunset. "Ivan," I said, she said, "are you content?" I considered it, gave it careful thinking. I reflected on who I was before Larissa betrayed me, who I was when I exacted my retribution, and who I am now. You know what? I was taken aback by what I realized. I'm content. Incredibly joyful. Irina gave my hand a squeeze. Her eyes were full of kindness and understanding. I thought back on the journey that had led me here as I sat there holding hands. I was shaped by the betrayal, the hurt, and the rage. Also helped me become the man I am today. A man who recognized the importance of self-respect, loyalty, and trust. I did lose my marriage, but I got a lot more in the process. I improved myself. The sky was adorned with vivid pink and orange hues as the sun sank below the horizon. Even though the day was coming to an end, I had hope for a better tomorrow. In the end, I had won the fight for my life, even though I had lost the one for my marriage. And I came to that realization. Of all the victories, it was the most significant.